Okay, so we're throwing in a quick few minutes on automatic enrolment. Has anybody staged yet? No? Okay. Introduced in 2012, automatic enrolment has helped increase the proportion of employees in a workplace pension. So the bottom line here, new workplace pension rules being introduced between 2012 and 2018, they have been a huge success. Yeah? Prior to launch, some of the industry was predicting very high levels of opt-out. In other words, employees saying that we don't want to be in this pension. And the last statistics that came out indicated that just 9% of employees were opting out. Yeah. It has been a huge success, unlike stakeholder pensions, if anyone can remember back that far, which were in the main a complete and utter flop. It's a bit of an advertising campaign for us as well, but we're hopefully going to give you a bit of information you can find useful if you want to do it yourself. So we've been involved in more than 20 schemes to date. The tightest one was one of Cheryl's clients, where they gave us 2 weeks. And in fact, we are still dealing with one that gave us 18 months. Serious point here, if you're going to do it yourself, if you're going to get advice, give yourself at least 6 months and potentially 12 months. Yeah. The evidence is showing that people are leaving it later and later. And early on, it hasn't been such a problem because the pension providers have been able to take the capacity. But if you think about the number of employers that are staging in the next couple of years, there is going to be a real issue around capacity here. There will be pension providers that simply turn business away because they can't cope with it. And what you don't want to be is lastminute.com with those pension providers. We've looked after various employers, 400 plus, 30, a range of different payroll sizes. What we have found early on, and this isn't just a plug for Barnes Rofe and their payroll bureau function, but in general, the key points once you have staged is you need to have good payroll. It needs to be clear, it needs to have clean data, just like you had to for real-time information. And if you haven't got good payroll, if you're working with a payroll manager that isn't very good, then it can be a real issue. Yeah? A real issue. The other thing that isn't on this slide we have discovered is if any of you are employers and you already have a scheme for your employees, don't assume for 1 minute that your scheme will accept you as a client. Yeah? Am I allowed to say so? Barnes Rofe's own scheme supplier declined Barnes Rofe as a client. Not because there is anything wrong with Barnes Rofe, but the old style commercial providers are being really picky and they are trying to cherry pick massively high contribution levels. Yeah? So in consequence, don't assume that the fact you've got a pension, they will want your auto-enrolment business, because they may not want it at all. Okay. Where do they generally seem confused? So the sort of questions we get asked, I saw a client last week over by Heathrow and he said, can we do this without you, Mike? And I said, of course you can. Absolutely no problem at all. When do we need to act? I've told you that already. 6 months, 12 months, ideally. Which employees should be included? There's a lot of confusion around that still. What definition of salary do we use? There are 4 different definitions you can employ. How does the opting out process work? What do we have to tell the employees? And which pension provider should be used? Those are the classic questions that keep getting thrown at us. And if you want to go and do it yourself, you can do. There are several providers out there that will allow you to do what we call DIY pension. So in other words, you can set the thing up yourself. And there's no doubt about it, because of the advertising campaigns, more and more employers are aware. Difference is being aware and understanding what you've got to do are 2 different things, I suppose. What this slide is trying to demonstrate is that to date we have generally had bigger employers stage who have typically got their own payroll function and maybe even their own HR function. As we move forward, it's going to be small and micros. They are very unlikely to have that. It's probably going to either be the boss or the boss's right-hand person that does this. And so as such, I think you can expect there to be a number of issues. For anybody that wants to go it alone, I tell you now that the pension regulator has done some fabulous work on this. The source material on their website is absolutely super. It's one of those wooden trees situation though, there is a lot of it. If you're going to ask for advice, I would suggest you need to know what you want, who you're asking to work for you, and what you're going to get for your money. And the reason that we put that down is, believe it or not, the biggest thing in workplace pensions for decades is a non-regulated activity. So if any of you here fancy, you could set up an auto-enrolment shop tomorrow. You don't need any qualifications, any experience at all. There is no regulation required to tell people what to do on this subject. Yeah? Understand what you need. We have come across authorised, regulated advisors that are trying to sell ongoing services. We'll set up the scheme for you, Mr. Client, and then we need to come back every year to sit down with your employees and we'll charge this and we'll charge that. Quite frankly, you don't need this. In our opinion, you need help to the point that you stage, and then within a couple of months, you will discover it is a payroll function. Cheryl, since we staged you, how many times has someone had to pick up the phone to me and ask me about a pension question?
I don't know, because they call you directly.
Never. Yeah? You don't need it. As an employer, if you want to pay fees for ongoing advice, pay them. All I'm saying is you don't need to. Yeah? This is, once you're in, it is pure payroll, nothing else. Again, another little plug, I guess, for advice. In a survey that GfK did for the pension regulator, 85% of larger employers said they had to consult with someone, and these are companies that have their own HR and their own payroll function typically. And this is most definitely an unabashed piece of advertising here. This came from the Centre of Economic and Business Research, and they tried to work out how much it would cost an employer to go it themselves, based on time spent. So not based on the contributions they're paying, just based on how much it was going to cost. And the numbers are quite staggering. But I guess the truth is here that if you are going to do it yourself, you've got to learn what it's all about first to understand then what to do. Yeah. And then just one final point on this. What we have found is if an employer involves the employee in the process, you get a lot better buy-in. If the employee thinks he's only doing this, she's only doing this because they've got to, it's not really a positive message. Whereas if you've got somebody that is consulted, you say to them, what do you want from your pension? Yes, we've got to bring it in, but we want you to tell us what you think would be valuable. Then from what we can tell, you get a much better response and a much better buy-in because they feel part of the process.